All right, you are watching Time Out with Doc and Caveman. I'm Dr. Fantasy here, as always, with my co-host, the Fantasy Caveman, and we are continuing to roll through with our NBA Draft Prospect Profile series. That's a mouthful. Never really thought about that, but that was a mouthful. But I just nailed that. So, Ziare Williams is the topic of conversation today. Ziare Williams, freshman wing from Stanford, 6'9", 190 pounds, a 6'11 wingspan. Last season, he averaged 10.7 points per game, 4.6 rebounds, 2.2 assists, 37.4% from the field, 29% from three, and then 79.6% from the free throw line. Caveman, what's your fun fact about Ziare Williams?
Okay, so this one unfortunately is not as interesting as the other two. I couldn't really. So you're saying he can't? He's out of Stanford. Fun fact: he is actually the highest rated recruit to ever come out of Stanford. So
Okay, that's
not
interesting.
as interesting as the other two. He's their first 5-star recruit since 2014, and I forgot what that guy's name was. So
Well, that's not a good sign.
he wasn't important for this episode.
Okay, fair
So
enough. What do you like about him?
all right, so he is a very interesting guy here. First of all, I think he has some of the highest upside of anybody in this draft class, just based on his length and his playmaking ability. Now, he didn't really, I don't know if it was the Stanford system or the guys that had around him, but he really didn't have that much of a chance to really showcase his playmaking ability, which I think is very underrated. You're probably not gonna see a bunch of his playmaking ability in his highlights, but he really has the ability to, especially for his size, to be a very solid playmaker. And the other thing, which is I'm sure something that you love about him, uh, he has the ability to defend multiple positions with his size. And a couple of stats here. So he held opponents to 37.4% from the field when he was guarding them, and 35% in pick and roll defense, which we know today's league is a lot of pick and roll. So he has the ability to be an excellent defender in the pick and roll, which is going to be huge for him at the next level. Because you really don't see a ton of guys coming out of college that are great in pick and roll defense. And that is definitely something that is going to be huge in his favor.
Yeah, and I think there's kind of two reasons for that. The first is that it does show he does have some defensive IQ. That's something that comes natural to some players, and I think it does for him to a certain extent. And it's because of his length too. When you're lengthy, it makes the pick and roll easier to defend, and he moves his feet. So I think that's a nice combination. But yeah, right, yeah, yep. So I think that that's going to be definitely beneficial for him at the next level. That was one of the strengths that I had. He's athletic, as you mentioned, and I feel weird. I mean, it's a conversation maybe for another time. How much of a strength is being athletic when it comes down to it at the end of the day? We're in the NBA. Everybody has some level of athleticism, and I think that's one thing that I'll point out with him is yes, he's athletic, but is he an elite athlete that's going to be able to transcend his game to a next level? I don't personally see that when I watch him. And that's one of the reasons that I think that his upside is capped compared to other players. Sure, he's athletic, but does he have that explosiveness to be an all-star caliber player? I don't personally see it. So that's a little bit of it. Well, maybe not a little bit. That's a pretty big knock on him overall. And I think that we need to stop getting in this habit. I'm not just saying us, just people that watch basketball in general. We get obsessed with athleticism, but athleticism doesn't always translate to being good at basketball. That's the reality, is athleticism can carry you to even through college basketball, but everybody is athletic now. And I think the reality with him is, yeah, he might be able to carve out a role as a defender off the bench, but I honestly don't know if I see much more than that. He can create his own shot, but I don't think he's explosive enough to be an elite offensive player. That's just based on what I see. I will say, and this goes into his weaknesses a little bit, he hasn't been an efficient shooter, but I don't think his form is bad, honestly. It's pretty clean for the most part. So I think he does have some ability to potentially be a better shooter than he is now. So you're looking at a guy with some length that's probably going to be a solid rotational 15-minute a guy 3-and-D player. That's personally what I see here. There's some people that have him pegged as being, and you mentioned he was a big recruit coming into Stanford. Some people have him pegged with this immense, crazy amount of upside, which if you see that in him, I think this is the kind of guy you take in the early 20s, and you kind of hope that he develops into more than a rotational piece. But if he's a rotational piece, you're happy with the value that you got. So the only other negative I'll mention too is you can see he is very skinny to a very extreme level right now. So that's something he's gonna have to work on. First thing, somebody's gonna get him in a weight room and get him to bulk up a little bit.
Day one, it's just going to be straight to the weight room. But yeah, you mentioned a couple of his things. I think it's important. I don't like using this as an excuse for a lot of guys. But if you remember with Stanford, they were dealing with a lot of COVID mess in the beginning, and there was a period where they couldn't practice for like a month. So I think that could easily attributed to some of his shooting percentages. I think it's kind of hard to get into a rhythm when you can't like practice for a month. And also he had reports that he was dealing with a lot of off the court family matters that they said may have been a distraction. So that I think that at least plays somewhat of a role in his inconsistencies shooting the basketball. But yeah, like you said, his mechanics are good. Like he has solid, like his shooting percentages. With repetition, I think we're gonna get a lot better. He's not gonna be a 29% 3-point shooter. You kind of saw his free throw percentage was up at almost 80%. So his form is solid, and I think we talked about this with several guys in last year's draft class. I'd like to look at your free throw percentage as kind of an indication of your shooting form, and if your shooting form is all right. So yeah, you and the last thing before we get to the comparisons and the team fits, way too many turnovers. Questionable decisions when he gets in traffic. He didn't show a ton of basketball IQ on the offensive end. So that's something he's gonna have to cut those turnovers down to the next level. That's gonna be one of the biggest things for him.
Yep, I would agree with that. I had that as a note further down my list as well. So let's go to some ideal fits. The first one that I have is Golden State. The reason I think they could use a little more length and defensive versatility off the bench. So I don't know if he would necessarily have the ability to develop into a starter in Golden State. But like I said, I'm not as high on him as other people are. So I think going to a system like that around proven offensive commodities where maybe he could also make up for a guy like Steph Curry's defensive inability. That might be ideal for him. And we don't know the future of Andrew Wiggins there. It doesn't seem like he's going to be there long term. So bringing in somebody like that as a rotational piece makes sense. I think Charlotte makes some sense. I think they're going to need some length and some defensive ability at the wing position, so I think he would come in handy there. And then I said Memphis as well. I saw a lot of people that like that one. I don't know if I'm as crazy as other people because Memphis, I feel like the Grizzlies right now have a bunch of rotational players and Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson. I mean, they have a lot of great rotational players, and I think he would be added into that mix. They could use a little bit of size and length, and that's one of the reasons that I do kind of like this fit is because they have lots of kind of guard, shorter wing players, but nobody with a lot of length. And I think he could kind of solve that issue for him a little bit. So those are the
Mhm.
three that I have.
Yeah, those are ones. Um, based on, I didn't know you were this down on him, so you're probably not gonna like this. But I said San Antonio.
God,
And I know you're not high on him, so you absolutely hate the fit.
I do.
But he just seems like the a typical Spurs wing with the way he can with his defensive potential. Usually,
Yeah, I was
you
like, he
see,
can't turn the ball over like that, though.
sure. I mean, but yeah, that's turning the ball over isn't that fitting. So you have to that completely gets thrown out of the window. Just not really, but I just like him because he seems like the prototypical Spurs wing. The Spurs wings aren't really known for nobody on the Spurs is really known for their offensive ability, uh but yeah, so and then I have the Kings as well as another possible fit. The Kings really lack a ton of wing depth, and even if on the lower end he's what you think he'll be, I think that would he'd fit very well in Sacramento as a nice defensive wing off the bench. Although I'm kind of not totally like, oh, he's gonna be the next great thing, but I'm a little higher on him than you are. So, yeah, I think he could be a very solid at worst good rotational wing, especially on defense.
Yeah, and he was very hard for me to come up with an NBA comparison
Oh,
for.
I got
I'm glad you do. I'll talk about some low end ones and maybe you have some better ones, but one that I kept seeing was Rashard Lewis everywhere. I don't like that one at all if we're being honest. I mean, Rashard Lewis was a very elite three-point shooter. So just I think their offensive games are way too different for me to be comfortable with that comparison personally. But
yeah,
a lot of people love it. So
I get it,
I
but I think the issue, and I think what makes it tough, at least for some people, to come up with comparisons, is that because of all the extra stuff, we don't know really how good of a shooter at the next level he will be. So I think his shooting, I think he's going to be better than a 29% 3-point shooter at the next level. So
definitely.
how good? What if instead of 29%, he's at least at the league average, which is around 36, 37. That to me that changes everything a good amount if he's that level of a 3-point shooter. Uh, the couple that I had Cam Reddish down as a comparison. Cam Reddish is had with Atlanta has the ability to defend multiple positions at a high level. I think that's a Williams could very easily do. And it's funny that you mentioned Andrew Wiggins because I think his upside is what Andrew Wiggins was supposed to be coming out of college. The player that Andrew Wiggins was supposed to be is, I think, his upside.
Mm.
So,
See, I think his upside is the player that Andrew Wiggins is now. So that's a difference in opinions there. I mean, I would say two names that came to my mind when I was doing it. One, I felt like I was watching the exact same film of a guy that we did an episode on last season. And I think that we could have just copied and pasted that episode and just replaced his name in it. That's Jaden McDaniels, who's with the Timberwolves now. Same thing, very athletic, has a lot of defensive versatility, but I don't. And Jaden McDaniels actually carved out a little bit of a role with the Timberwolves last year because he was good defensively. He didn't really find his way offensively yet.
You just don't like him.
Yeah, I'm just going to keep hating on him. And the other one is Josh Jackson back in the day out of Kansas. He's still hanging around playing off the bench as a 3-and-D player. That's where I see the future for Ziare Williams. I don't think he's ever going to develop into a star player.
I mean, do I think he's going to be a perennial all-star where he's going to be making all-star appearances every year? No, but I do think he has the upside with his defensive ability, and what I hope will be an improved three shot at the next level to make an occasional all-star team and be a real solid low-end starter for a while.
Yep. So we'll see. That's about our time here. So a little bit of a difference in opinion there, which is nothing wrong with that. It's always fun to look at it down the road and see what these guys become. So we appreciate you guys tuning in for another episode of Timeout with Doc and Caveman. Stay tuned. We'll have lots more prospect profiles coming soon.
Yep.